Hello and welcome to the Everything F1 podcast. Joining me this evening for our Japanese Grand Prix review, as much as it'll be, is Coops and Thiemo. Evening, lads. How are you?
I'm all right. I think I've just woke up from the Grand Prix, to be fair. No.
I did go for a nap after the Grand Prix, but then mostly woke up just in time for the European Le Mans series, which was a lot better, it must be said. Not that the bar was that high.
It certainly wasn't. This year I decided not to wake up at 6 a.m. for it, and I'm very glad I didn't because I got to fast forward through half the race. We will get into the Japanese Grand Prix review in a sec. There are some interesting talking points, even if the race itself wasn't exactly a classic. We get into that in a sec. Before we do, of course, we are Everything F1. You can find us on all socials at JoinEF1 or on TikTok at EF1 Official. You can also check us out on everythingf1.com for daily news and articles. And if you are a motorsport fan, check out our sponsors, theraceworks.com, for all of your F1 and motorsport merch needs. Use code EF1 at checkout for 10% off site wide. And of course, we are now on YouTube. All of our podcast episodes are on YouTube now. You can watch us live on every episode as we record them. We stream live on YouTube now. Every episode will be up during the week, as well as the podcast streaming services like Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So do us a favor, hop over to YouTube, see our smiling mugs and Coop's very bright orange jersey as usual. Give us a like, give us a subscribe, hit the bell, get notified whenever we upload new content, all that good YouTubey stuff. We've hit 100 subscribers, which we're delighted about. Only small, but we're getting there. Our next target is 500, and we'd love to hit that by the summertime of Formula One. So help us out with that. Head over to YouTube, like and subscribe onto the channel there. Now then, the Japanese Grand Prix. As I said in the intro, not exactly a classic. It hasn't been for a couple of years now, since Pierre Gasly ran through a board and nearly crashed into a truck. And, it's pretty poor to say that, a driver nearly killing himself is the last time the Japanese Grand Prix was interesting. Timo, what did you make of it? Are you glad you woke up early for it?
It happened, that's for damn certain. I know that
That's a
much.
fact. Yep.
Whether or not I'm glad I woke up for it, it's I like an early start as much as the next person, but at the same time, I wouldn't have necessarily minded staying in bed a bit longer. I think it's one thing to have a race like that because we're not going to have a classic every time. It's a shame that Suzuka hasn't been a classic for a couple of years, as you say, but I think it definitely wasn't helped by the fact that for those of us in the world that were stuck with Sky Sports and only that commentary for it, were finding new and creative ways to try and enjoy the benefits of being deaf.
Yes, if you are lucky enough to have not enjoyed the Sky F1 commentary this week, obviously Crofty couldn't exactly turn around and say, "This is boring as hell. Turn on to something else," or hit pause, have a nap, and come back later. But it certainly didn't help that he had Jack, I am the most boring and rigid man in the world, Villeneuve beside him, shutting down all of his commentary bits.
It's an interesting test of Grand Prix quality or a Grand Prix commentator rather, when you get a Grand Prix like this, because I then later in the day watched some of the Channel 4 highlights, which obviously they've got F1 TV there, so they've got the same commentary team for that. And it still doesn't necessarily make the race itself any
Mm.
better, but in terms of passing the time, it just flowed a lot better with the conversational tones, and you just go, it's like when you've got to fill a red flag period, you're going to have to find a way to do something with it, and some people are just better at it than others, and that was very apparent here.
It certainly was, and I mean, I can't knock Jack Villeneuve for telling the truth, at least, but he doesn't exactly. I don't think he's the most popular person, and I say that as someone who has lived in Montreal, and the Montreal track is one of my favorites. But it was obviously where Jack is from. But yeah, not great. Coops, what did you make of the Grand Prix that, as Timo correctly states, happened on the weekend?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, when my alarm went off at 6:15 in the morning to go down, I was expecting something, and yeah, it's weird because you do get certain races that you just know that this is not going to be good, and I think when everybody survived the first maybe three or four corners and there was literally nothing to talk about, I was like, yeah, France 2019. It just wasn't anything.
Why France 2019 when you can have China 2025.
Yeah, but there was a sprint race. There was a couple of conversations. France, I think, in the highlights that lasted about 6 minutes from Formula One, they showed everyone's pit stop in full.
To be fair, I
And
was
that,
amazed when when they put the highlights up on YouTube for this one, and it was 8 minutes long. I was going, "How have you managed that? How many different ways are you showing Lando Norris cutting the grass?"
yeah, yeah, and it was very quick after the end of the race that they managed to do that. Normally, it takes a wee bit longer. So yeah, it's a shame, but you know, it's one of those ones where we've got what 24, 25 races, sprint races included. They're not all going to be classics. Some of them are going to be classics for different reasons. Some are going to be classics because they're just mental. And then we're going to get one or two, or potentially more, that are just a bit, eh,
Mm.
I
or
think the stat I saw was that in 2024 you got 70 less overtakes than the previous year, despite having two more Grand Prix. And
Oh,
this year, every driver that's got on pole for a race, sprint
has
included,
one.
has then gone on to win.
Yeah.
And you just go,
The most
that's not gone to plan, has it?
the most damning stat that I saw of this Grand Prix, unfortunately, is that it's the first time, it's only the fourth time in history this has ever
Hmm.
happened, and it's only the first time it's happened at a permanent track that the top six finished exactly where they started.
Yeah,
The
saw
only
that.
other times that it happened, it's quite recently. I think it goes back to 2019 or 2020. It's Monaco, Singapore, and Monaco again. It's the three times that that has happened. The top six finish where they started, and it's the first time in history it's ever happened. All three of them are street tracks. It's the first time it's ever happened at a permanent track, which is unfortunately not good. So I suppose the first thing to talk about then is what can be done to fix Suzuka. Suzuka is the driver's track. All the drivers love it in a similar vein as Monaco. If you played the F1 games, it is a riotously good fun track to drive. And you could like Ollie Behrman was hopping out of the car in qualifying, saying that is the most fun I've ever had in a Formula One car. And then every single driver got out after the race and said that was really boring, wasn't it? So what do they do? Timo, I'll start with you.
Don't think it's Suzuka itself that needs fixing, it's the cars. Once
Mm,
again, I think it's the same problem that Monaco has in the same way that everyone loves to poo-poo Monaco. And I go, well, no, it's not Monaco's fault. It's the fact that you've got these cars that are bloody massive now, and you can't actually do anything with them. You watch an F2 or an F3 race, yeah, there's still not a lot of overtaking. There isn't, but there's a damn sight more than you get in F1. And you go, you get some drivers throwing some really interesting moves around some corners that you just know you're not going to get away with in the F1 cars. And that's why I'm hopeful a bit for next year to see what that new iteration of car can do at some of these circuits. And I think it's not helped as well by the fact that the loophole with the regulations, all the teams have pretty much found a way around what was the initial intention of them when they came back in 2022, which has meant that it's now, as Fred was so alluded to, a qualifying championship of you're kind of just all stuck on rails behind each other. And
mm.
that is something we did see sort of in China. You got a bit of overtaking, but again, not as much as you'd maybe expect from a track like that. And you saw it here. I hope we don't see it in Bahrain. I think there's going to be a different kettle of fish to deal with there, which we can get to in our preview. But I think some tracks where we're not used to seeing it, we'll see it more. And it's not just going to be Suzuka this year that's going to be a permanent track where we have this kind of performance. And I hope I'm wrong. So I hope maybe we can have some kind of craziness. But if there's no DNFs, if there's no reliability issues, there's none of this, then it might just be a long year.
It certainly will. And you mentioned like Formula 2 cars. I've just done a very quick search on it there. The Formula 2 cars this year are longer and wider than the 2006 Formula 1 cars. So anyone saying, "Oh, go back to smaller cars," unfortunately, that is completely impossible because they'd have to change four series worth of cars to make them all smaller again. You're right, that is the problem. But like there's surely ways that they can be made smaller. They will be made a little bit smaller next year. A big factor in it, obviously, is just the sheer amount of crap that's in the back. The engines themselves are piddly. They're smaller than the engine in my own road car, like in terms of the internal combustion engine, but the batteries, the turbos, the MGUH and MGK, all the gubbins that goes on top of it makes them massive. And they need just so much extra safety blankets around it, and the cars are way safer and all that sort of stuff. But there is still surely things that can be done to make them smaller and thinner as a good one, and lighter.
You
Coops,
look at the Super Formula race, sorry, just as a quick aside that they had in Suzuka double round a couple of weeks ago, and again, obviously much smaller cars there. You've got some great racing out of it.
yeah,
So it's doable. You
it
just
is
got to
doable.
find a way around it.
Yeah, Coops, you echo that it's the cars, not the track.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, these cars are 6 foot wide, or they're 2 meters wide, which is more than 6 foot. Because I'm
They're,
6'2" and it's 1.88 meters.
they're wider than London buses, if I'm not wrong, at
Yeah.
the widest point.
So they are big things, they're units. And if you want to talk about an advert for bringing back V10 or V8 with sustainable fuel, this is it.
Mm.
But I think I've heard that it's going to be rejected. I don't know if it's rejection because of the development for the new sort. Maybe they're looking at the next iteration of Formula One, like not
Hon-
this 26, but maybe
Honda,
2030.
it needed a 4 out of 5 approval. 4 out of the 5 engine manufacturers needed to approve it, and Honda and Audi have both said no. At least that's the report. I don't know if that's an official report, but or they are set to reject it because Audi are coming in because of this new um not as hybrid engine because they see it as more relevant for their road cars. Honda have stayed in because same thing. And Mercedes are favor the hybrid as well because they more than anyone have adapted Formula One tech into their road cars, all of their road cars, not just the AMG One hypercar. Um, but you're right for the 2028, 2029,
Yeah,
there
well,
is a possibility for that.
and why not?
Mm.
If they're looking at hybrids for sustainability reasons because you want to try and get away from the reliance on fossil fuels, then why don't you just become 100% sustainable fuel and you just put a V10 and a V8 in it?
Mm.
The question we look at again, because how many times do we do this when you compare it to IndyCar and you go to Monaco and you can't pass and then you watch the Indy 500 and everyone's on the edge of their seat because you just don't know what's about to happen.
Mm.
Should Formula One become more spec? Should it be more about drivers and more about, you know, the cars, maybe not in so much reliance on the cars and technology and what did that team do against that team? Is it more about driving, entertainment, and the talent of the actual driver themselves? You know, what is it that Formula One wants to be now? Because it's
It's
certainly
definitely
not
trying
the,
to be that balance, isn't it? But it seems to be leaning more one way than the other at the moment, and
yeah.
that's now becoming to its detriment.
Well, It's
Uh,
also it's also a question, as you said, about the car. So I saw a post today. Again, I won't quote the source. I'm not 100% sure how reliable it is, but had to have come from somewhere that the proposed South Africa Grand Prix won't be in Kyalami, which
mm-mm.
is ridiculous. But will in fact be on a newly designed, essentially street circuit, designed beside one of their stadiums in Cape Town. So it'll essentially be Miami in Cape Town. What a stupid bloody idea that is. We already can't race on street circuits. We're going as it was well, with the exception of one. We're going to Bahrain next, which is a lovely big wide circuit. We should get some overtaking because at least there's two back-to-back DRS zones. Um, so we might get some overtaking. And again, the cars actually fit on the damn track. You can go 3 or 4 wide through some of the corners. And Saudi is a bit of an anomaly as street tracks go, purely just because it's a super high downforce but super high speed track. So even on the DRS straights, like the wake off the cars is massive because they all have big wings. So the DRS effect is way more powerful. But beyond that, like Miami is going to be crap. Imola, Monaco, Spain, Canada, Austria. Austria might be all right.
Canada's the first one where we might have some because of the weather.
We might have some because of the weather. Austria should be good. Silverstone should be good. Belgium, if it rains, which is likely. Hungary, if there's a crash. Holland was pretty good last year, actually.
But
Italy
again,
is the worst example of like Italy should be the best race of the year, and I'm going to it, so I hope it kind of is. But the biggest problem with Italy is they all run with no downforce, so DRS has absolutely zero effect, and
yeah,
that's
and
just the summer.
you end up with a DRS train for
Yeah,
half of it,
and
and
that
or
that's
most
just
of the
look
race, and that's
that's
it.
just looking at the summer. That's just to the summer break. Like we could go on. Baku, Singapore last year was boring as hell. Um, Texas, Mexico, Brazil. Brazil will be incredible because Brazil's always incredible. Las Vegas, surprisingly, will throw up good because it's literally been designed for overtakes. Qatar, unfortunately, will probably be a bit dull, and so will Abu Dhabi. Um, so, and now they're talking about bringing in another one. I just find that strange.
I just don't like. I just kind of touched on there. What do Formula One want to be?
Mm,
You've got So it's quite a saturated market in terms of the different sport that you've got your supercars, you've got your Le Mans, you've got IndyCar. Formula One years ago, it was the place to be. That's where everybody wanted to be. That's not the case anymore. Look at Jack Aitken, who just decided, he tried to get into Formula One. Did he get a race, I think, during COVID, in the Williams,
Yeah,
I'm sure.
Abu Dhabi.
Yeah. And he himself just decided, you know what? This isn't working for me. Now he's doing well, and I think he's over it. Is it GT? I think he was doing last I heard. But he carved himself his own career without it, and it's not to the detriment of himself. It's not to say that he failed. He just thought, I want to
Again,
do
you see this
something else.
with other drivers that have gone into to F2 and either not graduated or just been passed over for whatever reason. They go off to IndyCar or something like this and they go and have a brilliant career. Or you have ex F1 drivers that, again, for whatever reason, it didn't work for them. And then you go, oh, they're not actually a bad driver. It was just maybe the cars in F1 or whatever
Hmm.
reason that within Formula One, it's yeah, it does raise up some questions. And normally the question is it sport or entertainment? And there's definitely still questions about that going around, including after this weekend. But
Mm.
like you say, you've also got this other thing of it's got a bit of an identity issue, which usually is a midlife crisis sort of thing. But F1's 75, so I don't know quite what we do with that.
No,
It's
that's true.
it's. I have no doubt that this debate is going to come back up over the next couple of weeks. We might be able to avoid it for Bahrain and Saudi, like I said during this triple header. But I have no doubt that come Miami and Monaco, obviously, and Imola, we will revisit it. But let's actually have a quick look at. There's no point going through all the teams and drivers because half of them finished where they started. But a couple of the key talking points I think is I'm going to say the Red Bull family, because they are interesting. Again, not necessarily where they finished or how they finished, but a couple of key points in it. Obviously, we've talked a lot about them over the past couple of weeks with Liam Lawson being dropped for Yuki Tsunoda. The drama over the weekend was that Lawson outqualified Tsunoda by one position. And is Tsunoda unhappy with the car? Did he do very well? Is Lawson all this going on? Meanwhile, Isaac Hadjar pops it in eighth and is now the second highest scoring Red Bull car on the grid, which is incredible. Max Verstappen led from pole and dominated the weekend, but Yuki finished 12th and Lawson finished
17th.
17th. So Red Bull, they kind of got away from a lot of the talk come the result because it worked out for them, except for Hadjar being better than anybody thought. But Timo, do you think that the news will sort of die off on them now? Have they dodged a bullet with putting Yuki in that car, or is this going to rear its head again? Should they be allowed just kind of brush it under the rug?
It's too soon to tell, I think. In some ways, it depends on what another team does, which we'll get to, and how much of the spotlight they take in kind of mimicking Red Bull and going, that looks like a great idea for how to run a team. Let's
Hmm.
try that instead. And Red Bull going, even we're looking at you going, I don't think that's the best idea, guys. But with Red Bull, yeah, it was kind of his Verstappen and Hadjar doing, in Verstappen's case, even more so than we kind of thought was possible from him, and Hadjar definitely doing what we thought was more than possible for him, and that's enough to paper over any of the other cracks that there might have been over the course of the weekend. Um, it is kind of amusing that after all of this drama with the Red Bull and Racing Bulls and Lawson Sonoda and all this sort of thing, that Sonoda then just go and finish in exactly the same position that Lawson finished in China. And you go, I love what we've done here, people.
Hmm.
But again, I was talking about this on another Formula One podcast, and we're so unsure of how to measure this by with any of the yardsticks available to us because we're going to get sucked into how Red Bull have done this, and that's not necessarily the right way of going about it.
Hmm.
So we're going, okay, Red Bull gave Lawson two races to measure him by. We should give Yuki two races, and if he's terrible in Bahrain as well, then by Jeddah, we'll think of something else to do. But you can't do that necessarily because you've got to compare him to himself with a whole of the different kind of metrics that Lawson obviously didn't have. And then on the Lawson side of it, okay, yeah, not a great weekend, but it is a brand new car compared to last year, and he's getting to drive it the first time with no preseason testing, and it's again very different from the Red Bull, which was the whole point of the argument in the first place for a lot of
Hmm.
this. So you kind of not in exactly the same spot of where you were, but you can see where you've just been, and there's kind of like the echo of you waving at you and going, "Oh Christ, what have we done here? We're not really sure anymore."
And they have sort of dug themselves into a hole on this. We spoke about this last week, myself and Coops. By all means, go check out our episode up on YouTube about the state of Red Bull, which we spoke about in quite depth after the swap was announced. And we mentioned it then. I'll just bring it up again that they gave Lawson 2 races. Will they give Yuki 2 races? Helmut Marko says he'll get the whole season, but what does Helmut Marko know, and what control does he have? None. In this scenario, but I think they've backed themselves into a corner, and it looks worse now because Hadjar's doing better than anybody expected. But they can't. If they swap Yuki and Hadjar, for example, and I wouldn't put it past them, and Hadjar doesn't work out, then they are screwed. Completely.
Well, then they've got
screwed.
F2 drivers. We got more. We can keep bringing in more. It's fine.
Do you think they'd want it? Do you think what's
At
his
that
name?
point,
The
they've
young
backed
lad?
themselves into a corner. They just bring Lindblad in, and they bring Goethe in, and they bring Marty in. You just keep going, keep going. Then we get to the F1 Academy gals, and it's all great again. It's because we've got the first F1 female driver since Ceci Wolf. So if they paper over the cracks that way.
That's one way to look at it. Coops, what do you make of Red Bull, their first weekend after the swap, and the comments that Christian Horner made, which I thought was interesting, that he said that he has flat out admitted they don't care about the constructors this year, they only care about the drivers. I can't imagine their investors, sponsors, and board are going to be too happy about that because they don't get any bloody money for winning the drivers' championship.
No, and he's doing that. He's the ultimate politician. He's doing that to take the pressure off Yuki. Because Yuki came 12th and never got any points for the constructors, because that's his role in that team, as we all know. Red Bull, the issue they have is they're only allowed 4 drivers to drive for a team in a season. So there is a line
Oh, I
that
didn't know
will.
that.
Yeah, it was another
But
podcast I was
it's going to
listening
be
to.
the rule where they have a Hadjar mask on, and then it turns out later it was Lindblad
Yeah.
and everyone else underneath it.
That was a very good Scooby-Doo reference there for anyone out there. Any of the younger ones listening, Google it. So, yeah, they're already screwed. I know you're saying they're completely screwed as it is, but they already are. And we've already discussed this. Like, this is decades and years of mismanagement of a situation and assets, for want of a better term, that they had that no one else has got on that grid. They've got another team in Formula One that they have control over. Like, let's not forget, your drivers are not signed for Red Bull for the Red Bull team. They're signed for Red Bull. They can go, they can be put wherever. Lando Norris signs a contract, it's for McLaren. It's not from McLaren Group, where they decide to put Lando in the GT when they decide, Le Mans, we're going to put a McLaren road car in Le Mans. And Lando, you're going in there because that's what your contract says. That's not how McLaren work. Red Bull work that way. Red Bull, it's you drive for Red Bull, and we can put you wherever we would like to put you. So that's why they're allowed to move people around as much as they do. And it's just the ultimate. This is culmination of what looks, from the outside at least, just total mismanagement and borderline complete incompetence of the younger drivers. Like, everybody is marked against Verstappen, and you just can't do that because Verstappen is who he is. Like, look at this weekend. Look at the pole. It's in the Saturday for the Japanese Grand Prix.
So there's a reason it's a one-in-a-generation driver. You can't be a
Exactly.
one-in-a-generation driver if everyone's that.
Aye.
It's not how that works.
Exactly. It's the term I've used before is he's a unicorn driver, and it was somebody else that coined that phrase, and it was a very good way of putting it. You don't get that many. And every sport has them. Your Messis, your Ronaldos, your Federers, Nadals. Sometimes a couple of what should be generational. Like, you get a couple, like you've got Rafa Nadal, Djokovic, and Federer that all came around about the same time. And other like tennis players and similar to drivers that probably would have won a lot of championships and had a bigger career, but they just arrived at the wrong time, and it can happen in Formula One. And we're kind of spoiled with having Hamilton there and Verstappen at the same time. But Red Bull, I've just got this, whether it's a subconscious thing or whether it's purely completely conscious, everybody's marked against what Verstappen can do to that car and what he can do in a race. And getting pole in Japan by was it 0.012?
Yeah, 0.012.
In a car that nobody, even Red Bull, thought would get pole. Like, but they still mark.
And he didn't even do any purple sectors to achieve that either.
Yeah,
so he didn't
incredible.
So it was just kind of taking the piss immensely.
Yeah, and Yeah, I just don't. I don't know what they do, and it makes a complete and utter mockery of their system, of what they do with the young drivers.
Hmm.
The young drivers must be looking at Formula One now with, I'd love to drive in Formula One, but there's that wee bit of, oh, wait a
It's
There's
minute.
not for
there's
that team.
there's four seats that you don't want, and it's okay, fair enough. We've got Cadillac coming in, so there's two seats more coming in, but there's still only so next year there'd be what, eight seats that you might want in Formula One. There's still four you don't. Like that's ridiculous. And there is something to be said for Zach Brown's pretty relentless push to get the second team of Red Bull removed from Red Bull's ownership. Um, it was on the cards, I think, but I don't think it's going to happen just yet. But yeah, it's interesting how they've kind of spoiled that, and you're right about the young driver piece. But on the flip side of it, you've got McLaren, who, there's a couple of schools of thought on it. They only care about the Constructors' Championship, which they are correct to do, and I'll hear nobody argue that. They are the team, they get their money for the Constructors. I'll hear no other than that. Jack Villeneuve was saying, well, they're naive if they think just winning the Constructors will be enough this year. They have to win the drivers. They do, but in their minds, they're thinking, well, if we keep plugging away and get double podiums in every single race, we'll win the Constructors by Singapore, and then the lads can fight however much they want. Coops, what do you make of McLaren? I know it was Crofty trying to drill up some drama. They were never going to swap, but should they have given it a go? Did they trust Oscar to give the place back? What did you make of just McLaren in general this weekend?
Well, McLaren did the best what they could have done. They blew it in qualifying.
Hmm.
They should have been 1-2, or at least one of them at front of or 1-3 or something. They blew it. Whether it was a mistake, whether it was just one of those, to coin the football analogy, a worldie. Sometimes you can't legislate, and a striker pops a goal, a shot in the top bin, and you can't have the top corner. You can't do anything about those kind of things.
Hmm.
And maybe that is what Max Verstappen did. He just produced the Formula One's equivalent of a worldie, and everyone just goes, "Do you know what? Round of applause. What do you do?" But McLaren shouldn't have been in that position to be that close to Verstappen in qualifying, and that's the point.
Hmm.
They did the best they could. They were not. They never got to a situation. I think it was. I don't know if it was Villeneuve or it was Ted Kravitz in his notebook on Sky Sports, but one of the pundits said that to really attack Verstappen, you needed to be under zero point 0.8 of a second or something. And
Yeah, it
none of
was on the
them,
notebook. Yeah.
yeah, you couldn't. None of them were under that. I think at one point they were about zero point 0.9, or maybe there was a wee bit when you looked at the timings.
Hmm.
It was like it went to zero point 0.8, but then within about a corner, it was back to 9 a second or about 1.5 seconds. And the amount of time to lose to allow the swap to happen for them to chase it, they just couldn't do it. It
Hmm.
just, and this again, it's not just the cars, but also the tyres. The tyres just didn't degrade,
No, it was too
which meant
cold.
everybody could drive the way they needed to drive. The temperature probably was a big part on it, so everyone could drive pretty much full tilt. And this again comes back to, like, you see a lot of people when it's tire management and stuff like that. Just let them race, and we need tires that don't degrade. Well, there's your data sample.
Hmm.
This is what we're going to get because they all just race, and the minute you get in dirty air, they back off, and that's it.
It's
So
because it's because in that scenario it's not racing. They're still not pushing flat out because there was an unknown about the tires because it was cold, it had rained, the track was new. There was an unknown, so they were all driving around going, "Yeah, I could drive flat out, but then what if my tires do degrade and then I take a pit stop and nobody else is?" It's not. It's different to Qatar a couple of years ago where they mandated the two stops because then what that introduced and why I think like introducing a mandatory two stop might not be a bad idea for modern Formula One. It's a bit of a gimmick, but then so was DRS. We've had that for 15 years. Um, the mandatory two stop at Qatar back in 2023 meant that they all had to drive totally flat out, 100% quali laps left, right, and center, and then it became a driver's race on a track that didn't really promote overtaking at all. But there was close battles, there was overtakes on track. A couple of the cars were still wearing the tires faster than others, and it was how big are your balls going into turn one kind of thing, and it was a little bit more exciting, and the drivers were struggling with it, and some of them were throwing up in their helmets, and Logan Sargent gave up entirely. Um, So there's an element of that of people saying, "Oh, well, if the tires don't degrade, then they can race." It's the other way around. If you don't have to worry about what the tires are doing at all, degrading, not degrading, splintering, blowing up, whatever, you know you have to pit twice, drive them flat out. It's like back in the day when they used to refuel. They weren't really concerned about the tires, they were concerned about the fuel limits. And it's, do you drive flat out and refill, or do you fill up for the whole race and do like Michael Schumacher did? It was at Spa. I did 22 qualifying laps in a row because he could, because he wasn't concerned about if the tires are going to degrade or not, whether they will or they won't. He had the fuel to do it, he had the tires to do it, he had the car to do it. You could just drive flat out and he won the bloody race. Yeah, I don't know. It's a bit of a Timo. What did you make of like McLaren? Bring it back to McLaren very quickly. Will they be looking at that as a, that was the best they could have got, as Coop said? Will they be a bit disappointed because a 1-3 is worth more than a 1-2 or than a 2-3?
I don't think they'll be disappointed because, as you both say, their primary aim, rightly so, is the Constructors' Championship, and that's where the big money is. And if they can wrap that up as soon as possible, then, like you say, if the drivers are in position to hunt for the title, then we can see the knives come out and it get a bit more fun in a different way. As for Japan itself specifically, I think it wouldn't have hurt them to try to send one of the drivers off after Verstappen. I think it was curious that they didn't have a split strategy really at
Hmm.
all between the two of them, because that seems to be the main thing you would do when it's 2v1 anyway, and it's against a driver and a car that shouldn't be there in the first place when you've
Hmm.
got the far superior machinery and, according to Lando Norris, the best driver lineup on the grid, and then gets immediately disproven by half of the team. Um, so it was a curious one, and Leclerc far back enough so that you could have the risk of it, and what's the worst that happen? You still finish second and third. So
Hmm.
I get the whole stick to your plan and don't deviate from that because it's a sensible thing to do. And I think if we'd had other stuff going on elsewhere in the race, we probably wouldn't focus on this as much. But because there was such a lack of anything, we can criticize a bit more because we wanted something to happen.
Yeah, I think you're right, and it's interesting. I heard this. Someone was saying this today. I think it was on a different podcast that McLaren and Red Bull are approaching the season in the same way, but for different reasons. So Red Bull's approach with Max is Max be on the podium all the damn time, and you'll do what Schumacher did in the years that the McLarens were quicker and the Renaults were quicker, and just by merit of being there all the damn time, you'll win the championship. Just that ruthless consistency of podium, second, third, first, second, third, first, second, third. Just be there. On the flip side, and that'll win on the drivers. On the flip side, that exact same approach will win McLaren the constructors. That conservative, we have a 2-3, we're going to outscore all of our rivals around us, even if it's only by, what was it, 6 points, something like that. We're going to outscore all of us. Red Bull are not a factor because they only have one driver, and even if he won every race, if McLaren were second and third to him in every race, McLaren would still win the constructors. Ferrari were far enough behind. Mercedes were far enough behind. So McLaren's approach was, why would we risk a guaranteed chunk over our rivals? But you were mentioning there about there wasn't much else to talk about, but not necessarily in the race, but in the weekend itself, there was a couple of interesting talking points. And I'll brush over it really quickly. Lance Stroll is back doing Lance Stroll things. Qualified 20th, finished 20th, hops on his plane, doesn't explain why. You know, still outscoring Fernando
Legend.
Alonso. Yeah, but top marks. Interestingly, Honda came out, I think it was yesterday, and said they will have a say in the Aston Martin lineup for next year. I think they've probably done that after seeing what a fucking wet blanket Stroll is. So I find that a little bit interesting. But the other big ones of the weekend, and it's causing a little bit of news midweek, is Alpine. Um, Obviously, Jack Doohan had that massive crash, thinking he was in the simulator. Still, Coops, what do you
Mhm.
make of it? Was this Doohan's Lawson moment?
I don't know if it's lost. I think the dude's lost his moment was when Alpine decided to sign Colapinto as a reserve driver.
Hmm.
Uh, I mean, they signed him up, and then they've signed like 14 reserve drivers. He's been in two Grand Prix. They took his car off him for a free practice at Suzuka and gave it to another rookie. He goes out in FP2 and bins it in the most spectacular way you can. Uh,
185 miles an hour backwards into a tire barrier.
nicely done.
You're gonna
You know,
do it properly.
Yeah, exactly.
exactly. I mean, if you're pissed off with your employer, cost them to spend a million, more than over, like millions of money, pounds to fix their car. Why don't you? They've since come out and said that well, they didn't know at first, and they were doing a lot of checking, and people were quite surprised. The commentators in Sky were like, "Hey, that's bizarre. Like that, I just went. That's weird." They came out and said that Doohan decided to try and do the corner with the DRS open. I think we discussed this prior to the recording that we're kind of a bit suspicious because
Well,
you
it doesn't
know
add up. To go back to a
it's a,
Scooby-Doo reference, there's some hijinks going on, and we can sniff around pretty easily that this doesn't all add up.
it just doesn't the whole situation we're doing in Alpine in pre-season testing were tipped to be best of the rest and fighting
Mm.
with Williams for it. And they've really not done anything. Their car finally, as you said, Sean, I think it was yourself, they finally managed to figure out how to do a livery with pink and blue. And it doesn't look like vomit. Uh,
Yeah, because
oh,
they're not wildly overweight this year.
yeah, so they've actually now got stickers on their car. Uh, but other than that, it's just bizarre how they're managing things. I don't particularly have much confidence in their team principal either. I mean, this is a team that had Otmar Snaps now as their team principal as well. I mean, Jesus. I mean, it wasn't a particularly high bar to try and get a team principal that was better than him.
It's not
Uh,
been going well since Cyril Abiteboul left, basically, and it shows. And it's a little bit like Red Bull in the sense that this has been going on for a while, and
Mm.
somehow you've still, as a team, not noticed this. The fact that you take out Doohan, a rookie, in his third race for an FP1 session, I can understand why you do it for a Japanese driver at a Japanese circuit, but why not give him Gasly's car? Gasly doesn't need
I thought that
have
too.
the experience around the
Yeah.
circuit as much. He's been more recent. The last time Doohan raced, there was an F3 Asia in 2019, so it's been a minute. And this whole thing with the DRS, if you're doing it in the simulator and it works, A, simulator, not real life. B, don't buy Doohan being that thick. C, don't buy him not telling someone about thinking I might try this and then giving him a blessing. So either they knew and said, yeah, go for it, in which case suspicious, or he decided I'm going to keep this to myself, which seems out of character for someone whose dad is Nick Doohan, and you wouldn't think that that would be something that would be in the racing DNA that gets transferred there.
Mm.
And as you say, after I think we discussed it before the podcast called, when he got out of the car and the discussions about it, you think, oh, you haven't got your story together yet. You don't know immediately because you'd be able to tell pretty quickly from everything what caused that if it is what you claimed it to be. But instead, you wait a while, and then when you piece that together with Flavio being Flavio, Oliver Oak's already kind of dismissing Doohan as early as the O2 launch, and the immense pressure he was in when he came to Australia, it all just smacks a bit too suspicious. On top of which, you've got Colapinto testing for them in Monza, going, please, no one noticed this. We noticed.
Yeah, they put him in a
Just
black.
doesn't come
They put him
across
in.
well.
They put him in a lovely stealthy black car to try and think that nobody plastered
Perfect
it with
camouflage for
B.
the green scenery
Yeah,
around there. Yes.
plastered it with BWT logos. But yeah, they tried to get away with it. There's also the point that like, okay, Alpine looked okay in preseason testing, but this is as if we needed any more proof that preseason testing means nothing. Um, Alpine finished last season sixth in the constructors on 65 points. 33 of those points came in Brazil.
Mm.
Without
there you
Brazil,
go.
without that one race, and okay, credit to the drivers. Ocon and Gasly did very, very well in that race to keep it on the tarmac, and most importantly, and then to lead the race and fight for Verstappen on merit. Right, fair enough. They did well in the moment. Without that freak race, Alpine were eighth behind Haas and RB. So like they're not in a good position, and the results last season flattered them to no end because of one race, where they got. I don't like saying they got lucky because I'm a firm believer in
They
you.
maximise an opportunity.
There you go. You put yourself in the position to get lucky, and they absolutely did that.
Mhm.
But without that, they were nowhere last year, and they're the only team not to score points this year. So that is going to be interesting. If and when Colapinto does get the call up, we will of course be doing a full breakdown news story of that. We might even do a proper look back at where it's all gone wrong for Alpine. Which
2018.
yeah, pretty much, which would be interesting, and the fact that they are Renault's sports division, and they won't even be using Renault engines next year because Renault can't be bothered anymore. That's what it really comes down to, is Renault don't care about Formula One, and they never have. Ever since Fernando Alonso left in 2007, Renault have not cared about Formula One. Even winning everything with Sebastian Vettel and Red Bull, they do not care about Formula One, and they never have. Um, Final bit of news then, Timo. What did Sainz get fined for?
You're not allowed to say in the words I want to use, so I'm gonna have to try and think of something else. But
Careful, the
yeah,
FIA will fine you too.
worth it. He got fined because he missed the national anthem, which on the one hand I can understand because you've got a rule saying you've got to respect the country's national anthem that you're going to, da da da. But there are valid excuses if you do miss it. And I would have thought that having some stomach issues, going to see a doctor, and actually having a doctor's note might qualify as a valid excuse. But no, instead you get fined €20,000. Okay, 10 grand of which is suspended, but still. And you just have to accept that. And they go, oh, you know what? It was 60 grand, but because you got a doctor's note, it's only going to be 20. And you still go, he wasn't well. And also, I don't think the Japanese will be too offended by this, considering what the reason is. It's not like he was going out the back and speaking in an interview, just dropping hate on Japan. He wasn't doing that. It was just, I'm not feeling great, guys, and I've got to get in a car in 5 minutes. Do you mind if I just have a quick look at something? So the fact that if I again have clearly solved all of their issues with the world and the universe and everything's great because we're focused on swearing and now we're focused on, oh, you missed the national anthem because you're ill. I'm glad we've solved all the other problems. That's all I'm going to say, because otherwise I don't know what we're doing here.
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird one. Like, I didn't actually even realize he had a doctor's note for it, so that makes it even worse. And my God, Mohammed Ben Sulayem is just on a mission to be the least liked person in the world this year, isn't he?
Working.
Yeah,
It's stiff competition, mind you, but he's putting his best in.
yeah. We won't name a few names, but I'm sure
I was going to leave it there. Don't worry.
I'm sure two people sprung immediately to a lot of people's minds on that one. Um, we will leave it at that for Japan. See, I told you there was enough to talk about to fill an episode of a podcast. Obviously, this weekend we are in the depth of a triple header now, which is exciting. The calendar has been sort of fixed this year so that there's not any random 3 and 4 week breaks in the middle of the season that are longer than the summer break like there was last year. We still get a triple header, and they are at least in the same part of the world: Japan to Bahrain to Saudi. Bahrain, of course, is this weekend. What are we expecting from it? We will have, of course, our full preview of it coming out in a couple of days. But Coops, very quickly, are you hoping for a little bit less of a wet blanket from Bahrain?
Bars set really low. Don't think we'll have much of a problem with that one.
Timo, what about yourself?
It can only get better, and that's not a dare.
It's not a glowing review, was it? Well, the other good thing about Bahrain this weekend is, of course, that if you're in Europe, UK Ireland time, the race starts at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So even if it is a little bit of a sodden rag, at least you haven't got up at 6 in the morning for it or 5 in the morning for it. That is this weekend, of course. I'll give you the times for the weekend. Practice 1, again, UK Ireland times, 1:30 on Friday for practice 1, 4 o'clock on Friday for practice 2, 1:30 on Saturday for practice 3. Qualifying is at 5 o'clock on Saturday, and then the race, as I said, is 4 o'clock on Sunday. So that is not too bad, and hopefully, as we said, indeed, exactly, it can only get better. We'll be back in a couple of days with our full preview of the Bahrain Grand Prix this weekend. So until then, all that's left for me to say is thank you to Coops.
Thank you.
And thank you, Timo.
Cheers.
This has been an interesting look at what was otherwise not the most interesting of Grand Prix, but thank you for sticking with us. If you have, we are, of course, Everything F1. Go check us out on all socials. You'll find us almost everywhere at Join F1 or on TikTok at EF1 Official. Do check out our website as well, everythingf1.com, for daily news and articles. And do head over to YouTube. Give us a like and a subscribe on the channel. We're trying to hit 500 subscribers as soon as possible. The more we can build up that channel, the more we'll be able to give you some more exciting stuff. And we have a lot of exciting plans for that, but we need to hit a couple of more subscribers first. So head over to YouTube, hit subscribe, like the video. And one final call out, of course, as always, to our fantastic sponsors, theraceworks.com. Get all of your F1 and Motorsport merch over at theraceworks.com and use our code EF1 at checkout for 10% off site wide. That's it. We will talk to you in a couple of days for the Bahrain Grand Prix preview. Bye now.